As I was scrolling through sports news articles the other day, I came across a specific article that really stood out to me. This article talks about the tragic passing of a once famous baseball player who was hit by a pitch which ultimately took his life. It's crazy to think that something like this could happen in a low-contact sport like baseball. Let me introduce you to Raymond Chapman. Born in Beaver Dam, Kentucky and raised in Herrin, Illinois, Ray broke into the major leagues in 1912 with the Cleveland team, then known as the Naps. Ray, the middle of three surviving children, did odd jobs as a boy and sometimes worked in the mines. In 1910, he went to Springfield, Illinois, where he played every position except pitcher and catcher. He was a very flashy player, recalled a Springfield teammate, and he could run. He was a beautiful runner. The way he could pick up his knees. He was very fast, had a good arm, and was a good fielder, although at times a little erratic. And he was very jolly, a jolly guy, always laughing, talking, singing. From Mount Vernon, Chapman went on to Davenport of the 3I League, where he hit a .293 with 75 runs scored and 50 stolen bases in 1911. Cleveland purchased Chapman's contract toward the end of the season and assigned him to Toledo for the American Association. Ray was unlike any other baseball player to step on the field in the major league. He spent his entire career as a shortstop for the Cleveland Indians. Chapman led the American League in runs scored and walks in 1918. A top-notch bunter, Chapman is 6th on the all-time list for sacrifice hits and holds the single-season record with 67 in 1917. A true legend, if you ask me. Only Stuffy McInnis has more career sacrifices as a right-handed batter. Chapman was, well, exceptional, and one of the greatest players of all time. He was an excellent shortstop who once led the league in assists. He batted .300 or better 3 times, and led the Indians in stolen bases 4 times. Chapman was also a legitimate offensive force in his own right. The right-handed batter led Cleveland in runs scored 3 times during his career and paced the entire American League in runs and walks in 1918 with 84 of each. He also led the Indians in stolen bases 5 times, and his 52 thefts in 1917 remained the franchise record until 1980, something you definitely don't see every day. Put it all together, and Chapman was, in the view of the Cleveland News, the greatest shortstop that is considering all-around ability, batting, throwing, base running, bunting, fielding, and ground-covering ability, to mention nothing of his fight, spirit, and conscientiousness to ever wear a Cleveland uniform. As good as Chapman was on the field, he was even more beloved for his infectious cheerfulness and enthusiasm off it. One of the most popular players in Cleveland Indians history, Chapman was a gifted storyteller who played the piano and once won an amateur singing contest. The good-humored shortstop also had a wide circle of admirers outside the game. His show business friends included Al Johnson, William S. Hart, and Will Rogers. One newspaper described Chapman as a man who was as much at home in the ballroom as on the ball diamond. Chapman was faced with several rivals as his career began with the Cleveland team. He had batted .310 for the Mud Hens in 140 games with 49 steals and 101 runs scored, but the Naps had 2 other promising shortstops. One rival, Roger Peckinpah, had played 15 games for Cleveland in 1910 but spent 1911 in the minors. The second, Ivy Olson, was the team's regular shortstop the previous year. Cleveland began the 1912 season with Olson at shortstop and Peckinpah, a favorite of manager Harry Davis, in reserve. Just 2 days after Chapman's arrival, however, Davis was replaced as manager by center fielder Joe Birmingham, who doubted Peckinpah's ability to hit big league pitching. Obviously, this didn't stop Chapman as he continued to work for that starting position which he knew he deserved. Eventually, Olson was benched after 27 errors at shortstop in 56 games and was nagged by minor injuries. Thus, it was Chapman's time to shine. Chapman hit a .258 in 1913, his first full season with Cleveland, and led the American League with 45 sacrifice hits to form a strong middle infield with the Naps' legendary 38-year-old second baseman, Napoleon the Frenchman Lejoie. In 1914, Chapman broke his leg in the spring and only played in 106 games. With Lejoie no longer in the club, the team collapsed. Chapman bounced back the next season to hit .270, and his 101 runs scored were 59 more than anyone else on the team. Unfortunately, Chapman once again faced leg ailments in the season of 1916 when he hit only .231 in 109 games. Despite his physical problems, Chapman's progress was widely recognized. In 1915, the Chicago White Sox tried to obtain him from Cleveland, but after being rebuffed, had to settle for acquiring outfielder Shoeless Joe Jackson instead. In 1917, Cleveland finished well back of Chicago in the standings, but Chapman blossomed. Sparked by his all-around play, the Indians won 32 of their last 47 games to finish 88-66 in third place. From August 31st to September 24th, they won 17 of 20 games, including a 10-game winning streak in which Chapman hit a .517 with 4 steals of home. However, Chapman's progress began to decline in 1918 as he finished the year with just a .267 average and 28 extra base hits. Despite those numbers, Chapman led the American League in runs scored with 84, thanks in large part to his league-leading 84 walks, which helped him post a career-high .390 on-base percentage. After the season ended in September, Chapman complied with the War Department's work or fight order and enrolled in the Naval Auxiliary Reserve as a second-class seaman. Chapman spent 3 months as a deckhand on the steamer H.H. Rogers, which sailed on the Great Lakes, and was captain of the Naval Reserve baseball and football teams. So to say the least, this man had multiple talents and was able to make it work with all he was given. Chapman was also a sprinter on the track squad where he specialized in the 20 and 100-yard dash. His best time in the latter event was 10 seconds. His service ended with the armistice in November 1918. The following year, Chapman rebounded to hit a 300 in 115 games for the Indians, who finished in second place with an 84-55 record, their best showing in franchise history. But after the 1919 season, in 1920, things got dark for Chapman. Chapman married Kathleen Daly, daughter of the millionaire president of the East Ohio Gas Company. Tris Speaker, Ray's closest friend on the Indians, was the best man. Before the 1920 season began, Chapman had thoughts of retiring as he was getting a little bit old for the leagues and now had a wife to tend to. Chapman was already secretary-treasurer at the firm Pioneer Alloys, which meant he had a lot on his plate during this time. Speaker was the new Indian manager, however, so Chapman decided to play at least one more year to help his pal and owner James Dunn win the team's first pennant. The 1920 season consisted of the White Sox being once again the contenders for the AL pennant, though they would soon be gutted for having thrown the 1919 World Series to the Cincinnati Reds. The surging New York Yankees, who, like the Indians, had never won a pennant, were led by Babe Ruth's unprecedented slugging. In mid-August, however, Speaker's club clung to the slim leads over both teams, and Ray Chapman was having one of the best seasons of his career. On the morning of August 16th, he had a batting average of .304, with 97 runs scored, 52 walks, 27 doubles, and 49 RBIs. Nothing could stop Chapman, not even his other job, not even the fact that he was now married and thinking of his future. Chapman was in the big leagues to play his heart out and gave it his all. Let's take things to August 16th of 1920 when the whole incident took place. The Indians were in New York for a game against the Yankees at the Polo Grounds. The day was dark and gloomy, which was not the best for a game of baseball. The Yankees' starting pitcher, right-hander Carl Mays, was a surly man, unpopular with both his teammates and other players. One of the few hurlers who threw underhand, Mays had a reputation as someone who liked to pitch batters tight. Carl slings the pill from his toes, wrote Baseball Magazine in 1918. Has a weird-looking windup, and in action looks like a cross between an octopus and a bowler. He shoots the ball in at the batter at such unexpected angles that his delivery is hard to find, generally until about 5 o'clock when the hitters get accustomed to it, and when the game is about over. But this didn't get to Chapman, as he wanted to give it his all and prove to the world he was one of the best. Chapman was 0 for 1 when he led off the 5th inning with Cleveland ahead 3-0. With the count of 1 ball and 1 strike, Chapman, who batted and threw right-handed, hunched as usual over the plate, waiting for the next pitch. Mays looked it in, and detecting that Chapman was slightly shifting his back foot, released a fastball, high and targeting the inside corner. The gray blur sliced through the heavy, humid air, possibly a strike. Chapman did not move. Many of the players and 20,000 fans heard an explosive sound. That was indeed the ball striking Chapman. Sports writer Fred Lieb, sitting in the downstairs press box about 50 feet behind the umpire, heard a sickening thud. The ball dribbled out toward the pitcher's mound on the first base side. Mays fielded it and threw it to the first baseman, Wally Pipp, for the out, apparently thinking the ball had struck the bat. Pipp turned to throw the ball around the infield, but froze when he glanced home. Chapman had sunk to his knees, his face contorted, blood streaming from his left ear. Yankee catcher Muddy Rule tried to catch Chapman as his knees buckled. Umpire Tony Connolly ran towards the grandstand yelling for a doctor. Speaker rushed over from the on-deck circle to tend to his stricken friend who was trying to sit. Finally, 2 doctors arrived, applied ice, and revived Chapman. He walked under his own power across the infield toward the clubhouse in center field, but his knees gave way again near second base. 2 teammates grabbed the shortstop, put his arms around their shoulders, and carried him the rest of the way. The game continued. Eventually, a 4-3 Indian victory. After the game, New York manager Miller Huggins, a lawyer, took Mays to the police station nearest the Polo Grounds to file a report on the incident. Mays was later cleared of all wrongdoing in the incident. Chapman was, however, not in good standing. The doctors in the hospital where Chapman laid made a 3-inch incision in the base of Chapman's skull, finding a ruptured lateral sinus and plenty of clotted blood. They removed a small piece of his fractured skull. Kathleen Day Chapman, pregnant with the couple's first child, was immediately summoned to New York. Chapman rallied briefly, but he died early the next morning before his wife's arrival. Kathleen, Speaker, and Joe Wood accompanied the body back to Cleveland. Chapman was seen off on his final journey by a large crowd of mourners at Grand Central Station. As word of Chapman's death spread around the league, players on the Boston, Washington, St. Louis, and Detroit rosters demanded that Carl Mays be banned from the league. Chapman's funeral at St. John's Cathedral on August 20th, Cleveland's largest in years, was attended by many baseball players and thousands of Indians fans. 34 priests participated in the service. A blanket made of more than 20,000 blossoms purchased by mourning fans was placed on his grave. Flags in the city were flown at half-staff. The Cleveland-New York game of August 17th was canceled because of Chapman's death. The demoralized Indians lost to the Yankees 4-3 when play resumed on August 18th, and dropped 7 of 9 games after the incident. And ever since, the franchise has never been the same. It's hard to say if Mays was responsible for the passing of Chapman, but we can say that he did have a lot to do with it. This entire story is so heartbreaking, and I cannot believe this happened during a baseball game. Ray Chapman is buried in Section 42, Lot 16 of Lakeview Cemetery in Cleveland. Raymond Johnson Chapman will always be remembered as a legend in MLB history, and his tragic story is one that will never be forgotten.